All right, so why don't we go ahead and get started? This is week 6 of Inside Voices, and I actually can't believe we've been doing this for 6 weeks. Every week I still am like, okay, what are we going to do next week? And are we going to have a next week? And what's going on? But we'll keep doing this until there's not really a reason to do it anymore. So I just want to thank all of you for being here and being part of this like little community we've been building over all these weeks. Today, our guest is Jeanine from Range. And Jeanine and I have known each other for many, many years, both working in the outdoor industry. And Jeanine has been an official trend forecaster. Like that's actually that's what she does. She does a lot of other things as well. And she will give you a more in-depth introduction of herself in a moment. But Jeanine has been forecasting trends for the outdoors and lifestyle brands for a really long time. And so I thought it'd be great to have her on the call today to be able to talk about what we should expect in the future and how that can help us make decisions around our businesses today. So I have a list, just as we've always done, but if any of you are new, I have a list of questions that I'll be asking Jeanine. If you have a question, pop it in the comments. We do keep everyone on mute because otherwise it's unwieldy and we've all been on those weird calls and no one wants to do it. So pop your questions in the chat and I'll make sure that Jeanine gets to them. So yeah, Jeanine, you want to tell us a little bit more about you and Range and all the things you do?
Sure. I just want to say thanks for having me, Jen. It's really important for us to bring community together, and you're always so good at that and just uniting and inspiring everybody. So thank you again for just herding cats and getting us all in the same place at the same time. That's half the challenge I do it on a daily basis. So my name is Jeanine Pesce. I am the founder and creative director of Range. We are a female-founded creative consulting agency, and we specialize in trend forecasting, strategy, and content development. Our team is all remote. All women, and I'll just keep saying that, just adding that in over and over again. Totally multifaceted creatives that are from all different backgrounds. I would say a common thread though for us is a very deep-seated love of the environment and an extensive understanding of this very complex relationship that exists between the fashion industry and the outdoor industry. My background is in fashion design. That's what I have a degree in. And in the early part of my career, I also worked as an editor, as a stylist, as a producer, before I landed with a trend forecasting agency out of Paris, which was my first official full-time job. And that was in 2004. So I've been specifically forecasting trends in the outdoor active lifestyle kind of wellness space, like boards, bikes, skis, anything that has wheels, since about 2005. And I started Range in 2012 so that I could get really more focused on the message and a very endemic understanding of the marketplace.
Awesome. Yep. We love Range. I mean, I don't know if you're not all sold right now. I don't know why I love this woman so much. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start with these questions. Okay. You've already seen them. We'll see what all of you out there have. We're going to start really basic. Why is it important to keep tab on trends? Why should we give a shit about trends right now?
So, I mean, I think there's 2 schools of thought here. One is from a business perspective, and one is probably from a consumer perspective. So on the business side of things, brands, companies, startups, it's essential to kind of know what's on the horizon so we can prepare and align on goals. And from a consumer perspective, I guess you need to know, what you can quantify or qualify as like something you may want to invest in the short or long term. So a lot of it comes down to short term or long term planning in terms of like investing or engaging with certain specific products.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think there's sort of this, like, a lot of times we want to poo-poo trends of like, oh, it's trendy. And
Yeah.
like, we're not talking about that. We're talking about like, how do you, like you said, like decide what we invest in, and understanding what.
And I wouldn't use the word trend for like years when I started Range. I was like very anti using that word. I wanted to establish the work I was doing as something bigger than trend or more dimensional than just trend. Again, given the fact that I have a background in design and fashion design and writing and journalism, like I kind of was able to bring more to the trend component than just like that. So it's funny, Range, when I started it, it was like this range of work, this range of time, this mountain range. I wanted this word that encompassed a lot of different skills that I had. And as I've gone through this whole evolution of being a business owner and creating a creative agency or a consultancy, because we're kind of a little bit more of a hybrid at this stage, I've realized that like getting back to trend is actually the most impactful, because trend forecasting is essentially a strategy. Mm-hmm. Trend forecasters were strategists before the word strategist existed. It's about like understanding the market, understanding the consumer, understanding what's coming, and how that translates to you or your specific brand, So it's really about this bigger understanding and how it's actionable and relatable to, the product you're producing or the story you're telling.
Absolutely. So wanted to talk about, so we're past this immediate scramble of like, we're all in this together, and the emails we've been sending out and like a lot of, we're kind of moving into like the what's next. And so I'm curious, like, what are you seeing now in terms of like what, like consumer habits or things that brands are doing that you think is going to actually stick around? So we made a lot of quick shifts, right? And we know that some of those are going to go away and some of the but what are we seeing now that you think is going to be with us for a while?
Yeah. So it's funny because like, I don't think anyone, obviously not us as like humans in the world or brands or corporations, knew exactly how to respond or position their messaging and their communications, like when the shit started to really hit the fan, because there was so much like lead up to, is this real? Is this, and obviously, no thanks to the current administration and the mixed messages and signals they were sending, like no one really knew how seriously to take it. I actually had my first client cancel a really rather large project on me the first week of February, because most of their business was done in Asia. So they were feeling the effects of what was happening in Asia as early as February. So that was my first round of like, oh shit, this is a real thing. And there was obviously, and there hasn't been up until this point, any kind of like masterclass or like set of guidelines to follow in, marketing during the time of a pandemic. Like this has all been very responsive. So I think we saw brands move from like business as usual, like, okay, nothing's on fire yet, to like, oh shit, things are on fire, and let's pivot to support mode. And now they're in like just straight up survival mode. Like, will we exist through this and after this? And, I think at the end of the day, and like regardless of like the current climate we're in, because we don't know when this will end or how it will end or when things will stabilize or what the new normal will look like, it will come down to like intention and values. And that can be said about anything, right? Like, is your intention, and are your values aligned with your consumers? And is that what you're putting first and making decisions against? This idea of like the new triple bottom line, which is like profit, people, and planet, or product, people, and planet, like whatever, however you want to kind of package it together, like that's like, those are the decisions that we need to make going forward. So, what's really interesting is like the outdoor industry, we have been mobilizing around global issues for a long time, decades: climate change, transparency in the supply chain, advocating for public lands, conservation. We are no strangers to like jumping into the front lines, providing disaster relief, for natural disasters like hurricanes and tornadoes and earthquakes. Like, we're always there ready to step up. So like, we've been on this program, and it's not shocking to me that so many outdoor brands immediately pivoted to manufacturing like PPE or surgical gowns or, face shields. Like, we have this inherent understanding of like making technically proficient products like meant to keep people safe in really extraordinary conditions. So, unfortunately, again, because our administration isn't really responding and reacting the way that we need them to, holistically, it's up to private sector to kind of like pick up where they're not, and kind of taking the lead there. So I think we're seeing some remarkable things come out of it.
What are some of the surprising or like more nuanced trends that you're seeing that you think like that, once again, aren't about like this immediate response now, but things that you think 6 months from now, 8 months from now, you imagine will still be something that a lot of us should be looking at?
I mean, I just think it's a question about, it more comes down to like a series of questions I think we're going to be asking ourselves that we've like not asked ourselves or not like acknowledged. Like, how much are we consuming? How much are we traveling? How many purchases are we making? What are the brands we're supporting? What are the values of those brands? Like, we haven't really, like, we've asked ourselves that, but we've never really like made big giant changes because of it. Like, I consider myself to be an environmentally aware, progressive person, right? I recycle, I compost, I avoid single-use plastic when possible. I try to, use my money efficiently to support brands that are purpose-driven. But like, I fly around the country twice, 3 times a month, going to meetings and conferences, and like, I'm thinking about the fact that I don't have to do that now. Like, I think we're going to see this, like, actually Lee Edelcourt, who's one of my most like favorite trend forecasting, like crones. She's in her 70s. She's been doing this for quite some time. She called it a quarantine on consumption. And I think there's something really like poetic about that. So I don't necessarily know if it's like surprising. It's just like people are getting off the hamster wheel and they're opening their eyes and they're taking stock in a lot of the decisions they've been making for themselves, personally and professionally.
So a lot of this, like on these calls, we've talked a lot about like messaging and communication. And what I'm hearing from you is that once again, the trends that you're seeing, it kind of comes down to that again. Like, what is the value that you're offering your clients or your consumers or your community? Because people are going to be saying like, okay, I'm taking stock of my life. I maybe don't need all the things that I thought that I used to need. And so people are going to like really become even more focused on brand alignment, values. What are all the things that this brand is, or nonprofit or freelance, like what I'm hearing from you is that it's like business as usual will not be enough. And you're going to have to really strive to make that connection and convey the absolute value, and the why. Like, why would people want to support you versus someone else?
And I mean, I think consumers have been on autopilot. Like, in this kind of like on-demand society we live in, where you can Uber Eats and get everything, delivered within 24 hours, and like, everyone's just using Amazon because that's the quickest, most efficient thing to do. It's like, well, what about Jeff Bezos? And where is he putting his money, and how is he treating workers, like right now? And How is he, how are we treating essential workers? Who are we considering to be essential workers? Like, how do we come out of this with a new framework for humanity?
Yeah.
And like that caste system
Yeah.
that influences every capitalist decision we make. And like considered consumerism is a term that we all love to embrace, but like how considered are we really being with what we consume? And I think this is an opportunity to step back and really ask ourselves that question, like look right in the mirror and be like, well, how can I change some of my patterns and habits?
Yeah. Emily has a question here. She says, I'm hearing a lot of big businesses talking about a return to normal. Do you think there will end up being pushback by consumers against this message?
It'll come down to like again, how you like kind of, I guess, fall in the political spectrum as well. Like, where are you, it's so subjective. It's going to come down to like what you believe, what is your truth, where you're getting your information from. Do you believe in science? Like, I don't necessarily know if we can quantify what the new normal will be. And I do think that consumers will push back on things when they're feeling that their health is at risk, or essential workers' health is at risk. We know that people are definitely mobilizing and supporting and rallying around people who are being affected directly. But, you have a whole other cohort of humans in the US and globally that are, driven by their rights as citizens, their amendments, the Constitution, and like what they deem to be like important to them. And that's like really subjective. I hope people push back if they don't feel safe or comfortable with things.
But it's definitely like, and we talked about this last week, that a big part of this is understanding your community and your customers, and like knowing like, will your customers find that return to normal to be inappropriate or not? So I think you like really have to evaluate who you're talking to. Yeah. My conversations that I'm having with a lot of people in the industry is that there's definitely a lot of priority being placed on smaller brands, and that I just got off the phone call with someone who big investor in a lot of like very large brand, like this is what they do, like VC style stuff. Oh, thank you about the bangs. I cut my own bangs last Thursday on Instagram as part of our Inside Voices happy hour.
I love it.
So thank you. And there is like the larger brand, like this phone call I just had before here he was saying that like the larger brands are actually really worried that they won't, like the purchase orders are getting canceled on them. They're not going to be able to make it. And so here we are thinking that all the smaller businesses are going to be the first ones to go away, but there could be some like big, like some of our greatest competitors could disappear because they don't have the connection with their consumer. They're like so big that the process of like getting smaller and being able to do that nimbly can't happen. Mm-hmm. So, I think that there's a lot of opportunities and like possibilities around being small and how we can use that to our advantage. And I think that like quick messaging and knowing exactly what our consumers want is like a good thing to do.
Yeah. And there's data out there. I mean, the data supports, it also depends on the cohort, boomer, millennial, Gen Z, how we get into it. But like the biggest demo that's emerging is Gen Z. They're going to be the biggest cohort in terms of like numbers and influence on the from everything from like product to politics. And they are the future. Like the data and the research that's out there shows that they are positioning themselves from a values-based perspective, from a purpose-driven progressive agenda.
Right.
So,
and that's across industries. So, Robin has a comment here saying like, this might be related to the outdoor industry, but how can we influence others? based on what you just, like, this is an entire generation.
That's a cohort. Yeah. It's an entire demo. It's not just like in the outdoor space.
Yeah.
Um,
So Stefani, I'll get to your question in just a minute, but Robin wants to know, do you think that we can influence people who might want to go back to their normal shopping patterns? Like, is there any influence to have here, or is it just continue to be like on brand and convey your values and connect, or are we trying to influence people?
I think that the less pressure we put, unfortunately for us as businesses, like, yes, we need them because we need to survive. Like, if people aren't shopping and buying products from us, like, we don't have businesses anymore.
Right.
But what I'm feeling is that, and maybe this is just what my gut is telling me, but the more pressure we put on people, the less likely they're going to want to be to engage with us. So I almost think the long game here, which people may not make it to, unfortunately, but like, it's really about the long game and that like existing relationship and cultivating that, continuing to cultivate that existing relationship. So maybe when they are ready to buy something, they're going to come back to you because you haven't shamed them or made them feel bad or put pressure on them. And Robin, I'm not saying that you're doing that, by the way, but like, there's all different ways to kind of, message things, and you don't want to sound desperate. You want to be dependable. I just got an email this morning from the Girlfriend Collective, and they're launching a new initiative that's like girlfriend to girlfriend. And like, we're seeing brands that are offering like emotional support hotlines, and like literally we're entering into a whole new, very like abstract kind of meta landscape with consumers, where like they're not just consumers, like they are our community. They are the people that we engage with on a daily basis. And like, what does that new relationship look like? I'm not really sure. Again, it needs to be through your brand's lens, but like, it's up to you to figure out how to deploy those communications to them in a sensitive of their needs kind of capacity. And again, I think a lot of that also has to do with region. Like, if you're in a harder hit region like New York or New Jersey or the Navajo Nation, for example, which is the third most affected COVID, cohort in the country, like, it's not about a hard sell right now. It's maybe about how can we be there to support you through this time. Yeah. I got your newsletter this morning, Jen, and I wanted to buy that matching set. And I haven't been spending any money, but I was like, oh, I really need this like checks a box off for something personal in my life. So it's not like I'm not going to spend money. I'm just not going to spend money to spend it. It won't be on frivolous purchases.
Yeah. And that, we've talked about that on these calls too, that like a lot, I think, last week, Amanda actually spoke quite a bit about this, of like, people are going to be buying things that they need. So like, what is it that you have that's cozy and comfortable and makes you feel good? And like, or what can you provide to people? Like, so it's kind of like reevaluating your products. And I think that will be a long-term trend of like people having comfort. So like, what can you do that is comfort, like mentally comforting, physically, like all of that? Like, how can you create that?
It's funny. I did an interview a few weeks ago with this like outdoor media, kind of like streetwear outdoor media platform called Vanish Today, and they were asking me like, well, what are the trends you're seeing for clothing? And I was like, honestly, like sweatpants, matching knits, Ugg boots, Crocs, glare ups, things that are like, we are hibernating. We are in that like nesting. And I don't necessarily think people are going to be willing to give that shit up once this is over. Like, oh, we can be comfortable.
I don't know if I'm ever going to wear a zipper again. I don't know if you can, zippers, button, I don't know if like, I'm just thinking like elastic bands and everything.
Bands.
All right, I'm going to keep getting into these questions. I'm going to go back up to Stefani. I'm going to make my way down. So Jeanine, what kind of data do you use or are you looking at when you are identifying trends relevant to a specific client?
So it depends on the market, right? So I'll try to get into market specific data and demographic data, but then I'll look at like overarching themes as well. So it really just depends on the client or the project. Is it a, what do they manufacture? Where is that relevant? Who is it relevant to? And I'll start to dig into reports that we all look at, in the outdoor space and beyond. So participation reports, census reports. I'll look into data that reflects, engagement, and data that reflects consumption habits. It's just dependent on like the actual project or the client that we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. And there's sort of like a similar follow-up question here. Like, can you direct us to any specific resources? Like, are there websites or like name reports or anything?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, so this is, again, either if like you're a consumer or a business. I'm assuming the person asking may have a business or work in the industry. So the big, most notable resources out there are WGSN, Stylus, Promo Steel, and I can send these as a follow-up to you, Jen, too, if you need to flag it. The Future Laboratory, the Cassandra Report, Nielsen. These are all either trend resources or aggregators of data.
Cool. Yeah. And I just want to add one thing, like, as someone who works in the outdoor industry, I try to follow what's happening outside of the industry. Yeah. So Coalition is clearly a feminist brand. So I follow like what's happening in the world of feminism and other brands that are in that space. And so I'm looking at like what's happening in media, what's happening with apparel, what's happening in consumer goods. Well, and like I get way outside of the industry to see what else is going on, because that's how I feel like we can bring in new clients, is to be more relevant than like so outdoor focused and try to be a little bit bigger. So that's something that I do, is actually look at things outside of the industry. But these are good. If you, when you'll all get this email follow up, and I'll include some of these in that. So we have another question, Jeanine, from Carol. Do you think that there's an opportunity to give people a chance to voice their concerns and questions about what to do next and brainstorm solutions, in a sense, creating new communities around your brand?
Yeah, I think there's like, it feels almost like an opportunity for like open source intel, like bringing your community into the decision-making process, as opposed to just making product and deploying it to people because that's what you've always done. Like, this is an opportunity for more collaboration, more of a cooperative approach, where we are open sourcing ideas, feedback, intel, and applying that in real time. And like, the tech exists, it's out there. It's just, again, back to the business as usual conversation. It isn't going to be business as usual. We need to be more responsive. We need to be more emotional. We need to be more engaged with what people need from us right now, and then and making those quick pivots in that direction. I mean, obviously people can't change their entire like business structure, or can they? I mean, if your business is having trouble, which most businesses are right now, 99% of them are, unless you're getting a bailout from the government, because it's just like, socialism for capitalists. Like we're all iterating and pivoting and figuring out like how to be more responsive right now.
Yeah. Okay, we have another question from our community from Kirsten. What about the potential growth of the outdoor sports market as a result of the physical distancing measures? As trails and outdoor spaces open up, how can we engage with people who, after months inside, are ready to branch out? Also, love the Crocs.
And love the what?
Crocs.
I have them on right now. I have so many pairs of Crocs, and I'm like such a Crocs advocate. So that's a perfect question, and this is something I talk about a lot. My husband, Cooper, is actually the creative director of Arc'teryx, which is an outdoor, obviously, equipment and apparel brand. And they have this conversation daily. Like, how are we going to be prepared for when the moment, like the floodgates open and everyone's back at REI or back at MEC or back at the small retailer, or local shop they support. And it's like, you need to be ready. It's going to be, I think there'll be a boom, like a gold rush kind of moment where everyone's back out. And, there is a lot of data as well out there to support like how many people are getting outside in the wake of the pandemic and since the pandemic. And I think at first we saw those numbers rise dramatically because people weren't really understanding the impact that getting outdoors in small towns or maybe gateway towns to national parks were having, and like the strain it was putting on the resources. So we did see kind of a spike in people going outside, and then realizing they needed to pull back a little bit and be more responsible about how they were recreating outdoors and where they were recreating and staying closer to home and more about micro adventures as opposed to like going out on, into communities that weren't theirs. And now we're kind of starting to see that level out. Obviously, the weather is about to get better. People are going to be tempted to go outside. And I think people are just, waiting with bated breath to return. Like my husband and I are about to pull the trigger on buying like a camper van for our family, which is something that we've wanted to do for years, but we've always been like, But now we're like, oh my God, if we can't fly and travel, or we need to reconsider the way we fly and travel and see and recreate, like maybe it is the right time for us to buy the camper van we've always wanted so that we can be totally self-sufficient and, exploring, the place we live in as opposed to going to a further destination. So I think people are definitely going to be just ready to roll as soon as, legally and from a health perspective, it's safe to do so.
Yeah. Well, and that's another opportunity to think about, like now you can think about your messaging for when that happens.
Yeah.
You can think about how maybe you have like new social media challenges or ways that you like bring your community together of like celebrating their time, and because I think like regardless, people are going to continue to only purchase things based on what they think that they really need and the value. So like I would imagine that like, yeah, like you're going to see like an uptick in anything for hiking, running, things like, so all right, we have more questions.
And what is interesting, just to add one more point, like my job is like I work with product and marketing teams directly at some of the biggest brands in the country, from like the Nikes and the Adidases to the North Faces and the Patagonias and the REIs and everything kind of in between. And like the marketing teams are focused on like crisis management and communications. The product teams are still head down. They're still working on 21, 22, launching, like they are like, yes, things have been like reined in terms of budget and like production, but like they are still designing for those, they're still looking out to the future. So like that continues no matter what.
Yeah. So speaking of that, like if we go like even past this fall and winter, do you see any other long-term trends on the horizon that we haven't talked about today? Like even like, or talked about yet that will be even further out?
I mean, I think this like Earth first mentality is really going to be more universally embraced. Like that's actually a trend I believe, not just I want, but I believe will now be not just in the outdoor echo chamber, like little bubble that we all exist in. Like my dad, who's like, a regular Joe kind of guy who doesn't necessarily consider himself to be super educated about the environment, is really looking at, his consumption patterns and single-use plastic and like questioning things he never questioned before. And like, we know that, COVID is not obviously like the silver lining for climate change. Like the world, the environment, like everything is getting a moment, to temporarily pause. Like but that comes on the back of like tragic economic slowdown and human distress. So, I think that's going to be something that is universally embraced going forward.
Yeah. And Jim just wrote, like, even beyond the environment, more genuine connection and empathy. Yeah. I think that connection, like how you as a brand or a nonprofit or freelancer, like how do you actually connect with people and how do you create value for them? And that's the end game.
Yeah. And it's funny, I've been having this conversation about like, working from home with kids because I have a toddler. So shout out to all my parents out there working from home, keeping their shit together. But like empathy and like flexibility are two of the biggest like words that we use when it's like, well, how can we be more supportive of our colleagues that are working from home with kids? And it's like, have patience with them, be flexible, have empathy. I think those are going to be just like universal themes, like, to his point.
Yeah. Well, and people are really responsive. Like we had one of our main retail partners sent us an email and they were like, we need all of your assets for your skis. We need them in two days. And I wrote them back and I said, we're not actually able to do that anymore. Lauren, my partner, has a toddler at home with her full time. So we are not able to turn anything around for at least 2 weeks. And we will put, this is important to us. We will do it, but there are no more quick turnarounds here. And they were like, okay, thank you. We understand. No problem at all. And I think that that's something like being more open and honest with people and like, this is what we can do. And this is why, like, it really is sort of, I mean, it's refreshing and like, it's about like, I felt like I could say that because I was like, I want you to be the one who's like, you're all women team with kids. No, you have to turn it around faster. Be that guy. Like I knew that, and so I knew that I was just gonna like see how far I could do it. Yeah. No problem. Like, no. And I think that that's a trend is like being able to take longer for certain things. Yeah. I think this could be a return to or a amplification of slow fashion that like, you're not going to get something in 2 days. It might take a little bit longer than that. Like, I think those are some things to look at.
And like, we have been saying yes to everything, like, especially small business owners. We're like on it, right on top of that, Rose. I got it. Like, okay, I'll work through the weekend for you. And it's like, no, that doesn't work for me anymore. I actually don't need to fly to be there in person. I can do this on video, or like, here's my boundaries. Like, we're going to see boundaries emerge again, which I'm obsessed with the idea of. Yeah. My husband Cooper, and I've said this before in the last few weeks on some other podcasts and things I've been talking on, but like he mentioned that like we've been orienting ourselves around work for so long, this like very Western mentality of work. And now we're going to be orienting ourselves around family or whatever that definition of, safety is for us or comfort is for us, so like establishing better habits and maybe even beating the burnout, the millennial burnout and all the like the obsession with work and career and excellence and,
Yeah. Well, and I think that also like, there's more ideas for your messaging and your campaigns, family, safety, comfort. Amanda here says, hi, Jeanine. Any of your clients starting to plan around what physical retail space will look like as quarantine measures start to be lifted? How do you think that experience might evolve in a way that makes shoppers feel safe and connected?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I don't think they know yet, honestly. Like, I was just reading this morning about prototypes for new airplanes that are essentially like the 3-row is like 2 of the seats face forward, the middle seat faces back, and there's panels of plastic between the seats. Like, I don't think people really know yet what the new retail, like brick and mortar experience will net out at. I think what they should be planning on is how they can bring their brand to their community virtually right now, and at least for the next 6 months to a year. I do know that in China, stores are reopened and they are doing a lot of business. So there is an end to this. And I think, I'm not exactly sure what the, like from a legal standpoint, or what the guidelines have been in terms of like creating personal space and protecting consumers, you know, in terms of social distancing. But I think there's definitely something to be seen if we look to that region and how they've reopened and rolled things out. I mean, they were in lockdown for 2 to 3 months, depending on where. Japan is still in a state of emergency right now. So really it's looking to China, I think, and Shanghai and Hong Kong, and how they're kind of seeing consumerism reemerge. It's just definitely a different version of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's hard about here is that, number one, everything's a guideline in the United States. There are no, as a business, you must do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, there's no like clear mandate.
There's no mandate. Like, we're seeing this massive disaster now with the meatpacking plants because of this exact thing. You know, so that's, but I think that this comes back to, like, if you have any sort of physical location or any sort of event, the more that you can show that you care about people and you care about their health and their safety as much as you care about like the community side of it, that's going to be so important versus just like, oh, we're open, come on in. Like, I think we're just going to have to be so thoughtful about every single thing that we even attempt to do in person. And I agree with you, for like 6 months to a year, or like until there's a vaccine.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to be so thoughtful on anything where you're engaging with other humans.
And maybe it's just thinking about everyone and like taking this idea of audience or consumer and just literally thinking about as community, like your people. How are you going to support your people through this and be there for them in whatever way, shape, or form we come out of it?
So one thing, with the like virtual, like thinking about doing everything virtually, are there things that you're seeing now from any brand, business, anyone, where you're like, wow, that virtual event is so fucking good?
Yeah, I mean, I think the virtual trade show is going to be interesting, that we were talking about earlier, thin air, right? I think a lot of the museums are doing really interesting virtual tours, that, you know, and virtual seems like so spacey, like like a virtual, like maybe there's a different way to even say it, where it's like just not in person, or, you know, online or something, you know, an online event. Maybe that's a better way to say it. But brands are definitely getting creative with how they're serving and servicing their community right now. And I mean, Travis Scott just had a concert in Fortnite, which is like, what? Like, that's crazy. So I think things are just going to get really, really experimental. And like the Met Gala, for example, which is like, you know, the Met Gala, like one of the biggest like events in the fashion calendar, they're going to be doing like a Met Gala challenge from home, where like, you know, users are going to be able, or people are going to be able to submit user generated content of them like recreating their favorite Met Gala look, like stuff like that. You know, the Field Mag is going to be hosting a virtual, like the world's shortest marathon online kind of thing, with all the proceeds going to support nonprofits. Like, there's ways to get creative about it.
Yeah, to do fun stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie. I'm glad that you think this virtual event is so fucking good. That makes me very happy. Fortnite. Yep. Awesome, Lisa. So let me ask you this question. I mean, we can still keep taking questions from all of you too, but most of us here, you know, we're very small brands, nonprofits, freelancers, 1, 2, 3 person shows, limited budgets. Even before this, we didn't have money. We didn't have money. We don't have money now. We probably think we never will have money. I don't, maybe I'm just speaking for myself. I don't know. But
projecting
the fact that there's never enough money for anything. Can we turn this into like a therapy group for me?
Yeah.
for all of us, what can we do to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to trends? Like, we don't have big teams. We don't have the funding. Like, as we're all in our own time every day trying to like navigate this, like, what's your recommendation for really small teams who have just, I mean, entire capacity is like so small?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like taking the word trend out of the equation altogether, and just like paying attention to culture and shifts and the values you're trying to project as a brand. You know, like, trend is such a dirty word to some people. Like, oh, it's trendy, that means it's not long lasting, and that means it's going to like be a fad, or it won't be relevant a year from now. But like, impactful trends that have meaning, that are bigger picture, like the environment and values and sustainability, and, you know, the way we treat other like humans. Like, I think those are the important things to pay attention to, as opposed to like a singular fashion trend or a singular like fad, and in that very literal definition of the word trend. So embracing some of the like the bigger movements that align with yours.
And being articulate about it, you know, so like now is the time where you can really think about reworking that about page and thinking about your email flows and what you're sending out, you know, just like really.
Oh my God, speaking of email, I read there's some really frightening data that I just found the other day, about, you know, specific to newsletters. So from a consumer perspective, like, how they ask consumers like how often you like to receive newsletters, and once a month was the most celebrated answer at 64%, and once a week was 10%. So it's interesting because it's like, well, are we sending more or less emails? Like, what's the cadence of emails? How much are we communicating with people? I think I want to hear from brands, at least, or at least the brands I'm aligned with. I don't want to hear from everybody, but like at least once a week, when the messaging is relevant or valid or useful, or it's content that I'm like using as a distraction, you know, or like applying to my daily life. So I think it's about like curating your newsletter list as well, and making sure that that is actually reflective of the content you want to get.
And segmenting it and sending certain messages to certain people, like that's really important. We have another question here from Stefani that says, the virtual meeting is catching on. I'm in the climbing industry and several climbing festivals are considering this. In the past, I've had a booth and connected with people. I have no idea how a brand can benefit from this type of virtual event. Have you seen anything good? I don't want to pay for a virtual booth that is basically a banner ad. She wants to know what she could share with event coordinators on if someone else is putting on the event and you want to come in, like historically, like we'd have a booth, you know, brands have booths. How could a brand be involved in that you would actually generate some sort of ROI?
It's a really good question, because this is a total new landscape and unknown terrain for us to explore. 5 Point Film Festival just took their film festival, which is again usually a place where community comes together, and like there's programming and there's events and there's days long where everyone's in the same space, and they're, you know, they are deploying all their films, you know, digitally, which obviously makes more sense because it's, you know, the medium, right? It's a film. It makes sense for people to stream something. I don't really know what will happen in terms of, we're seeing in the fashion industry a little bit more, it's happening quicker there. Like there's some programs like JOOR, JOOR, which are like virtual showrooms and virtual line sheets that you can basically like see, and there's new order, stuff like that. But in terms of like a physical, like in lieu of a physical destination outside of like Fortnite or Sims, like I don't even know. Like I'm definitely interested.
I would personally, like, if this were me, it might be me, who knows, like I would actually be trying to see like these events what is their presence outside of that particular virtual event that they're having? And does my sponsorship of that event, does it get me access to being featured in their email? And how many, like, what's their subscription and what's the open rate? I would want to know, can I do a takeover on their Instagram?
Yeah.
Like,
what are you getting for it? What are other, like, what's the added bonus or the gift with purchase, or where's the value add? I think value add is going to be a huge bargaining point for people right now. Like, what else am I going to get for this? You know, it's not like you don't have to just eat crow and say yes to whatever the like shitty package was.
Right. So so you may not have that booth, and maybe, you know, that virtual event, there's not like a place for you as a brand, but that whoever's organizing it likely has all these other avenues in which they're talking to people. And how do you make sure that they're talking about you? So Amanda says that this weekend I was part of a Zoom pub quiz where we were split out into small groups and then would come back to the main Zoom room after a designated period of time. I wonder if you could use this kind of setup as an alternative to trade show booths. I've seen that happening too. Amanda, I'd be interested if you like thought logistically that worked well, or if that was hectic in your Zoom call.
Funky. Yeah.
And then Candy's saying that she's participating in a virtual wedding show, and the organizers are having everybody submit a 1 to 2 minute video that they're streaming live on the day of the event. It's free, so they're just testing it out.
Guys, this is the new normal, I think, right? Like, just being completely open to how can we connect with each other? You know, like my daughter, we had a virtual birthday party for her the first week of quarantine, before it was like a thing. And I just used Google Hangouts, somehow got all of our like Luddite family to figure out how to log into it. And you know, it was just as impactful for her as like a real birthday party. Like, she thought she had a real birthday party, you know? So it's like, it's our perception of things. And maybe we just need to be more open to and more flexible and like more willing to try new things, because everyone's going to be trying new things.
Yeah. Well, and Amanda just added in here that the person who ran her event is a pro who makes a living at doing virtual quiz nights. So like, clearly some people have a leg up because they've been doing like virtual events for a long time. But I would just recommend to people, like, this is the same reason why I'm subscribed to so many emails. It's market research. I just want to see, like, what is everyone else doing? Like, I want to know, like, how often are you sending out an email? What's in the email? What's the content? How does it go along with your Instagram? Like, start participating in other people's virtual events. And then I think you can get an idea of, like, did it work for you? And then I do think that there's absolutely this process of testing. Like, you're going to go through iterations and see what works and what doesn't. And just, I think, you know, Amanda last week spoke about, you know, not trying to be perfect and not trying to be precious and all of it. And at some point you just execute, you just get it done.
Is this Amanda Smith from Monday?
Yeah.
Yes. Hey, girl.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see you again soon in person. We're both Vancouver, so we've been trying to get together. We're actually going to be rolling out a new product offering, which we were planning to do before all of this went down, and now it's even more relevant than ever. It's going to basically be a bite-sized version of our really comprehensive trend reports that are going to be delivered on a weekly basis. So reports that are just like really insightful and actionable and deployed in real time and really close to market, that will give, you know, more on the B2B side, less on the consumer facing side of things, but just like giving our clients and contacts the insight they need, like right now, to make decisions that will impact them today in real time. So I'll keep you posted on that, but we're rolling that out at the end of May.
And so how can people, is that going to be, people are going to pay for those types of reports?
Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, that's the goal. And because right now there's a barrier to entry for, you know, regular smaller businesses to afford our services. Our trend reports, like our really in-depth seasonal trend reports, are really labor intensive and there's a price tag associated with them. Sometimes we work on them for up to 2 months, you know, and like they're really labor intensive. So this is a way for us to offer something that's more less price prohibitive, and more actionable, that we can maybe deploy to a larger, you know, prospective client base.
I think that's fantastic. And I just want to say, like, I know we've talked about this, like, there's a lot of, like, people are very hesitant to charge for things. I think we need to get the fuck over that, and we need to understand our value and know that, like, if we're creating with something with value, that people will want to pay for it. Like, and it's, you know, it's that process of understanding, like, what can you create? What's the price point? Like, it's what we've all done with everything that we've all created. Now there's just this new opportunity to do it. And I don't think that we should be thinking about how everything that we do is free. Like, I just think that, like, this is a way to be creative. Stefani wants to know if this trend report that you have, which I'm sure everyone can go to your website and learn more when it's.
We haven't, we're like, this is literally, I'm like, this is an exclusive, like, I'm kind of dropping some intel on the group that we haven't even publicly discussed yet. So it's very exciting.
Yeah. Is it specifically for the outdoor industry, or is it broader for this trend?
It's going to serve the outdoor, active, wellness, lifestyle industry. It will just be, I keep coming back to this idea that it's like serves the apparel industry, like the greater apparel industry. There will definitely be it will be bent towards outdoor and active, because that's what I specialize in. That's my area of expertise. And it's a very underserved market in terms of this kind of information. There's tons of this kind of intel out there for the fashion industry and the tech industry, for example, the beauty industry, but there isn't a lot that's geared towards the outdoor and active sector.
Awesome. Well, I will, in the email follow-up for this, you know, I'll link again to the Range website, and everyone can follow Range on Instagram. This is Range, and Lisa, I believe, still curates your Instagram feed.
Yeah,
Awesome. I follow.
He's the best.
I follow. I love it. It's great. So we're out of time. Here we are. It's been an hour.
Yes, it is.
Jeanine, I want to thank you so much for being here and taking the time to share your expertise. I want to thank everybody who's on the call, who joined us again. Happy to take feedback and ideas for future sessions. Once again, you'll all get this. We'll be putting this call up on the YouTubes, and I'll be sending out an email, and we'll probably see you next week.
Fabulous.
Jeanine, thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you to everybody. Stay safe, everybody. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.